Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's that week. It's that week of the year when I'm scared because there's a turtle and I've been told to fear it. And I'm right as I'm saying these words, I'm starting to get this weird sense of deja vu. So I'm thinking I probably started one of the Maryland Week shows last year with this exact same conceit. But I'm still scared. So here we are a year later, still scared.
It doesn't surprise me that you would use the same conceits, Tom, because you know where I'm going with this. You are very conceited.
That's what they say about me.
That's what I say about you.
Well, one of the things you say about me.
Yes. So today's show, we talked to Ryan Day on Tuesday. So we thought we'd recap some of that, get into what he was saying about the football team. There's still stuff going on. We're still learning stuff about this team, and he's still learning stuff about the team. And we also talked to Marcus Williamson, Mitch Rossi, and Nicholas Petit-Frere. And I thought there was also some interesting stuff that came from them. So we're going to go over all of that. First, before we even get started, Tom, I think one of the key things that came out of today is there was no mention of any Ohio State quarterback. So that deal must be settled at this point. There is no questions about CJ Stroud's shoulder. Are you still wanting to get Kyle McCord some reps? Who is your backup? The topic never came up. The only quarterback that came up today was Taulia Tagovailoa. So that to me is, I was just going through and looking at what was said, and it's like, nobody asked about the quarterback, so nobody must be concerned. I guess that's a good sign.
Now we have to find new stuff to complain about. Don't worry, we're on the internet, so I'm sure other people will tell us what to complain about. Yeah, that's sort of just gone away. And I think as long as CJ Stroud's shoulder is healthy, that's gonna kind of be how it is. Because you've seen Kyle McCord now. Kyle McCord is now not the shiny new thing that has no one has ever seen throw an incomplete pass. No one has ever seen do anything wrong. So okay, you've now seen Kyle McCord. You've now seen Jack Miller. You haven't seen Quinn Ewers, so maybe Quinn Ewers can be the shiny new thing. But Ryan Day keeps telling you, like, no, he's neither shiny nor new, or maybe he's too shiny and new. So you're sort of in this like honeymoon period now, where CJ Stroud is back in everyone's good graces, and everyone is happy, and you've seen what is behind CJ Stroud, and it's like, no, that is not in fact better than a healthy CJ Stroud. So now until his first incomplete pass against Maryland, everyone's happy with CJ Stroud.
I would posit that the media, except for me, perhaps you, are cowards. I was the only person in 2019 after week 5, week 6 saying, Ryan, isn't it time for Chris Chugginoff? Are you convinced that Justin Fields is actually going to get this team where it needs to go? Shouldn't you give Chris Chugginoff a chance to show what he can do? Because we don't know that he can't not do what he's not been able to do. And Justin Fields, we've seen what he can do. It's fine, but don't you want to know more? I was the only person on the beat.
You may have forgotten me recording the LL Cool J cover, It's Time for Chugs. Now, it didn't get played around the WAC as often as It's Time for War, but it was still, I thought it was pretty good.
The annoying thing about that is around the beat, people will sing It's Time for Or, in honor of you.
Well, not people, one person.
One person. But now, like when I have that in my mind, I hope it doesn't get replaced for It's Time for Chugs. That would be a very disappointing turn, although I guess it would also fit that same person at times.
Thus concludes Tony's audio subtweet.
So that's the quarterback situation. TreVeyon Henderson, as Ryan Day said after the game, is good to go. He said that again today. He's good to go. He was asked if Henderson is ahead of where he thought he would be at this point. And even though maybe TreVeyon Henderson has said this is about what he expected, Ryan Day, being the realist, said, yeah, he's beyond what he expected him to be at this point. But you take into account how mature, how professional he has been from day one, and starting that day one way back in January, not having a senior season, they're expected. We talked about, don't expect him don't expect him to be starting from the outset. We were right about that.
Yeah, and
we were totally right about that.
Yeah, that was not just us being haters, because Ryan Day said the same thing. Ryan Day came in with the same expectation. Because I think you're seeing that somewhat Jack Sawyer, where Jack Sawyer didn't play his senior year. And that's something that I think Ryan Day sort of talked about, he's not quite ready. And it might have been Larry Johnson as well. He's a little behind because he didn't get to play that senior season of football. And I think we expected that from some of those guys, because I think Evan Pryor was in that boat. TreVeyon Henderson was in that boat. Jack Sawyer was in that boat. And somehow it hasn't affected TreVeyon Henderson one bit. That just means he's fresher. And then he runs for 1,000,000 yards. And, I think he's exceeding every possible expectation, because you go through the Ohio State freshman rushing phenoms, and it's basically Robert Smith, Maurice Clarett, J.K. Dobbins, and now TreVeyon Henderson. And it's like, well, that's extremely elite competition, first of all, or people to be in that class of. And we're only 5 games in. And, one of the questions Ryan Day got asked was like, so why aren't you giving him the ball more? Like, what are you, an idiot? And, well, that wasn't part of the question, but it was clearly the subtext. And, and Ryan Day basically said, like, they're just trying to be super, super responsible with him right now. And if they don't need him, they're not going to give it to him. They're trying to, manage his carries, manage his workload. He was asked about, hey, he did sit out a little bit in the second half. Is he good? And he said he's good to go. Like, in a way that it was like there is zero concern about him for Maryland. But they're just sort of trying to manage it right now. But, you get the sense that as soon as they need him, he's going to get 30 carries. I came away from that with zero question in my mind that Ryan Day said, feels this is the guy. This is the number one running back. It's not there's 1 and 1A. This is the guy. TreVeyon Henderson is the first string running back.
Yeah, and just looking at his numbers, and I know he left that Tulsa game rushing for 277 yards. I believe that has been corrected down to 270 yards.
Correct.
Master Teague was one of those carries, so he went 23 for 270 yards. On the season, he has now rushed for 500, and let me do the math, 503 yards on 53 carries. If he had gotten 20 carries a game all season long, and he would have 100 carries right now, where would you put his yardage? Because
what's he averaging right now?
9.4 yards per carry. But if he had actually carried the ball 20 times against Akron and Rutgers, I mean, you're talking about a guy who may have 1,000 yards rushing right now.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I think we were trying to be very responsible with the projections for him before the season, because we had heard, I think everyone had heard, like, hey, this guy's like crazy cuckoo bananas good. And you hear that about freshmen sometimes, and it's like, and then you put it out there like, oh yeah, this guy's, Nick Bosa is crazy, crazy athletic. You won't believe this guy. And it's like, all right, he's going to have 47 sacks this year. And then he gets like 3.5. And then you feel like a jerk, kind of dumb, but also kind of a jerk for putting these unrealistic expectations on this kid. You've seen freshmen not work out in a whole bunch of different ways. So, remember we had conversations about, who's going to be the leading rusher this year? It's like, well, I think TreVeyon Henderson will win the starting job at some point during the year, and he may be the leading rusher with, I don't know, say 800 yards. And it's like, yeah, that might be before the bye week. He has 800 yards. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. He's just sort of exceeded all reasonable expectations. And, there's at least 2 other freshmen, I think, who are on that, in that same boat as well, which is just, that's not normal. Like that, this is a real historical outlier freshman class, which means the freshman class of 2022, like RIP your mentions, when sometimes it might take you like 3 weeks to get up to speed and not just immediately be like, oh yeah, that guy looks like an All-American. Because what you're seeing this year from guys like TreVeyon Henderson, Denzel, Burke, Tyleik Williams, and I mean, there's other guys, but those 3 are the ones who like really jump out to me. That's not normal. That is what you're seeing right now is stuff you should like never project freshmen to do, because it's an incredible outlier to see guys actually be able to do this early in their careers.
We probably will eventually go back and look at our projections and predictions.
No, let's not do that. That doesn't generally work out for me. Let's just move on.
I can tell you, I'm probably about 150 yards away from where I had TreVeyon Henderson topping out. just because, you don't want to, 1,400 yards. That's what J.K. Dobbins did. Well, don't put that on anybody. And you've got Master Teague, you've got Maya Williams. Where are the yards going to come from? And I remember maybe one of my bold predictions for the season, or predictions for the season, was that there'd be no 1,000-yard rusher. Right now, good luck with that one.
There isn't one yet.
Right. I'm not trying to put that out there, or, say it's definitely going to happen and then jinx something. But boy, 500 yards rushing in 5 games when you only had 2 carries in one game, and you've only had two games of double-digit carries. I mean, he's beyond impressive, and he is removed from games out of just sportsmanship and fear of getting hurt, yes, but also sportsmanship, because if you just keep running him, Ohio State's going to keep scoring. And against Tulsa, against Rutgers, let's come on. These are scholarship players. They're just trying to get a college degree. You don't need to just beat them into oblivion with TreVeyon Henderson. You can, just let him do that against, say, I don't know, Michigan. But you mentioned Tyleik Williams. I tweeted this out yesterday. He now has 4 sacks on the season. That leads the team. 4.5 tackles for loss also leads the team. Those 4 sacks are more than any Buckeye had all year last year. It's more than Chase Young had as a true freshman in 2017. It's more than any OSU freshman defensive lineman since Nick Bosa in 2016, when he had 5. Tyleik Williams didn't play in the first game. Played 3 snaps in the second game. So this is basically what he's done in 3 games. I would assume at some point in the next month, he'll probably match Nick Bosa and then possibly exceed him. I went back as far as I felt to go back. Other people went back further. It's the 4 sacks are already the most for any OSU true freshman defensive tackle that I can find. And as I said, this is just 3 games. And when we talk about TreVeyon Henderson, Denzel Burke started, JT Tuimoloau started, Kyle McCord got to start. I don't know that Tyleik Williams even needs to start right now, because he's producing very well, doing what he's being asked. But Ryan Day did say, he's going to be out there more. Just don't worry about him. He's going to get his snaps, because when you're this productive, and this, he's playing about the third most snaps among defensive tackles. And that's basically because Teron Vitsa has been out, Jerron Cage has been out. But I don't think he should be losing his snaps right now to anybody else as the team gets healthier. Like, he needs to be out there as much as possible, but maybe that's only 25, 30 snaps, because right now he's playing, 15 to 25. You don't want to take him too far beyond that, because you're getting a lot out of him right now with what he's doing.
Well, and the issue with true freshmen is you always wonder, when are they going to hit the freshman wall? Are they going to hit the freshman wall? And if they do, like, when does that happen? And I think that is a concern with Henderson. And that's why one of the reasons they're being so careful with managing those snaps is, this is a lot more games and a lot more physical games than these guys are used to playing. Tyleik Williams is the same thing. Tyleik Williams had to remake his body, and he's in, significantly different and better shape than he was as a high school player. But this is still, this is going to be a different challenge for him. And you're going to get, if you're getting pounded on by Penn State offensive linemen and Indiana offensive linemen and Maryland offensive linemen, like, that's a very different challenge to what you faced in Virginia high school football. So I think they're going to be try to be responsible with managing his snap load and keep him from wearing down too much over the course of the year. And that's sort of a challenge for all of these guys, I think, to some degree. But to whatever, I think he's a little bit like Henderson, where it's like, based on what you've seen, that's about the only reason not to play him more, or to play him only somewhat more. And, they may be kind of like working him up, sort of ramping him up from, 10 snaps to 15 to 20 and 25, and just sort of slowly, gradually building that up, because they do. Larry Johnson likes to rotate those defensive linemen, pretty liberally throughout the course of the game, regardless. So, whether he starts or not is kind of irrelevant. Mm-hmm. But if you continue to see those snap counts kind of slowly inching up, I think that's going to tell you they like everything they're seeing out of him. And then it's just a matter of sort of managing his workload to keep him healthy, because I think they know they're going to need him later in the year. And he's going to be getting better. That's the thing about all these freshmen. They're going to get better as they get more, more reps at the college level, see more, now then you sort of see new stuff as a defensive lineman, as a running back, as a quarterback, as a corner, all of that stuff. So they're going to kind of ramp those up as the season goes along. And, I think these are guys that the coaching staff has figured out during the important games. We're going to need a lot of these freshmen to be significant contributors.
You mentioned the freshman wall, and I thought, hey, that's a pretty good nickname for Tyleik Williams, other than the fact that walls just stand there and he doesn't. So maybe the entire front four of Tyleik Williams might call JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. Maybe we call them the freshman wall, but he is anything but a wall, unless you're talking about a trash compactor wall that just, comes at you and then crushes you. Maybe trash compactor wall, trash compactor freshman wall, doesn't roll off the tongue, but we'll workshop it, we'll table that. And there's still Donovan Jackson getting time as this fourth tight end that they like to play, and Jack Sawyer, Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison. All of these guys play minutes. I think you'll see more from Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison as they go. Perhaps I'll go back and look at perhaps the most explosive freshman class in Ohio State history when you look at the immediate impact that they're having. Certainly the most impactful starters, and spot starter in Kyle McCord as a true freshman. The fact that Donovan Jackson is able to play two positions right now, basically, and without being an early enrollee, very impressive. I think Jack Sawyer will obviously continue to get better. Emeka Egbuka has already shown a little bit of what he can do, and Ryan Day is very, very high on both of him and Harrison. We'll see more of them as the season goes, but also not just playing more, producing more, because they still haven't done that. And I would include Jack Sawyer there as well. He's got one sack in the season. Emeka Egbuka, we saw the big catch. Marvin Harrison has a couple of one or two shorter catches, but they're all going to start producing more because they are playing. And I even wrote in my in this week's What I Know, What I Think, What I Wonder, maybe Donovan Jackson, Tom, becomes the second true freshman here on the team to catch a touchdown pass this season. TreVeyon Henderson being the first. Wouldn't it be crazy if an offensive lineman is the second? You've got these outstanding freshman receivers, and everybody else but them is catching passes in the end zone.
I saw that, and it was like, that would be like extremely fun, and that would be a great way to just, he's earning time on the field, but if you can reward him with something like that, like, great. I do wonder if they will, try and get that to a veteran. Like that's the kind of thing you typically will try and reward a veteran with, rather than, Mitch Rossi is like literally already graduated college and then just caught his first touchdown pass. So I wonder, you put Thayer Munford. That would be a great thing to have Thayer Munford in as a, an extra blocker on a play, and then throw one to him. Like that seems like that would be sort of cosmically the right thing to do. But yeah,
and
I'm with you though.
Block-O jersey.
Exactly. I was getting there. Yeah, he could check in as an eligible receiver and wear the Block-O jersey. So yes, that would be pretty win-win. But yeah, it is remarkable that you've got all these guys in there, because to your point, like you go through the freshman classes in history, and it's like the 2002 freshman class was like, wow, this incredible freshman class. But as far as like impact during 2002, it was like, well, Maurice Clarett did it. And then some of those guys were good on special teams, but it wasn't like the linebacker core was, Bobby Carpenter and AJ Hawk and Mike DeAndrea. That, they didn't really play that much on defense that year. And the interesting thing is, you're talking about these other guys who haven't necessarily made a big impact yet. Go back to 2018, Chris Olave. Chris Olave, you think of as like, oh, he had a huge freshman year. Like, Chris Olave, back in October, they brought Chris Olave out for interviews, and we wrote a story about Chris Olave, and people were all mad. Like, why are you writing a puff piece about a freshman wide receiver who hasn't done anything yet? And then he, a couple weeks later, that weekend or something, he did, I think, the Michigan State game, he had some catches. And then, a couple weeks later, he's catching a couple touchdown passes in the first half against Michigan. And all of a sudden, no, he's all caps, Chris Olave, hooray, everyone loves Chris Olave. That, we're still a month away from that point. Like, that's, maybe that's at the end of this month to bring out Marvin Harrison for interviews, and everyone's angry at us for writing a Marvin Harrison profile. Like, that's how far ahead of schedule this class is, because Chris Olave was a freshman phenom, and that didn't start for another month. That's how far all these guys are ahead of schedule. That's what's really crazy about this. And one of the things that kept Chris Olave from maybe contributing earlier was he had to sit out his senior year of high school football. This is the stuff that when we're talking about this stuff before the season, it's like we're looking at historical precedent. And like historical precedent has nothing to do with this year's freshman class. Like they are the exception to every rule at this point.
It's fun just watching them grow into themselves and do it really quickly. It's like Ryan Day and just throwing some Miracle Grow on them, and you can, like, the time lapse is present time, and it's just like it's not time lapse. It's actually just going crazy like a cartoon weed type of thing. You mentioned Mitch Rossi. Let's talk about him a little bit. We did talk to him. Just one of those guys who I didn't realize this. He grew up a Buckeye fan. His parents are from Ohio. This is always a dream for him. We know he visited with Max Ray, high school teammates, back in recruiting. Max Ray obviously signed with Ohio State, got a spot start last year, eventually transferred. But Mitch Rossi stuck around, graduated last year, and then I thought it was interesting how his scholarship, he was finally put on scholarship, and it was basically not just because, like, hey, I don't want to have to pay for grad school, but I have to take grad school classes, and they were like, yeah, okay, we'll put you on scholarship. And so he no longer had to pay for that, which is a blessing and a boon for his family, and a guy who, when he was asked, like, your different checkpoints along the way, your different accomplishments, like, do you remember them? Like, what meant the most? And as he was talking about them, I remember, like, most of these, because Mitch Rossi, when walk-ons start to play, like, you take notice. When you see them in practice, you take notice. And you mentioned each step along the way, like, he was a running back, then he got moved to the tight ends, and yeah, you remember seeing him in practice with the tight ends, and then he got time in special teams, and you remember seeing him in games and special teams. And then, like, oh, here comes Mitch Rossi. I was in this great in the fourth quarter of a blowout. That's good for him, getting to play a little offense. And then now it's like, yeah, Mitch Rossi's in the first quarter. That's just how this is. And you've gotten to see this. And his family, he said that they traveled to all of the games after his first career catch last week. After the game, met with his parents, and his dad had tears in his eyes, and his mom was emotional. And it's one of the cool things about all of this, when a player who owes so much to his parents for allowing him to do this, then gives so much back by allowing them to live through this with him and experience this and see their son grow to become so much more than he ever thought he could at Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, he said he had other options coming out of high school, and that's probably a lower level program, or he said, like, just be a normal college student. Like, that was another option for him. And he considered it, and he said, like, I didn't want to do it the easy way. I wanted to do it the hard way. So he has chosen to do it the hard way, and he's gotten there. He is now a scholarship player at Ohio State who is like a legitimate. It's not like, this is not like a Rudy story. This is like, he's first of all lined up correctly and not offsides, and second of all, his story is true. And third of all, he's actually good at football. Like, all of these things are good. Like, make the Mitch Rossi movie, not the crappy Notre Dame movie. It's so interesting to me. He's one of at least three guys I can think of who ended up being a better player for Ohio State than the teammate who Ohio State was originally recruiting when they found him. So he came to Ohio State with Max Ray, who was like a borderline top 100 offensive lineman who started the Michigan State game last year, but just, was not close to starting when, half the offensive line room wasn't wiped out by COVID. He ended up transferring to Colorado. Chris Olave, who we just talked about, Ohio State, Ryan Day was going out there to look at his high school team. It was Jack Tuttle, right? From Indiana. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jack Tuttle, who's the Indiana quarterback now, or backup quarterback, or maybe starting quarterback. I haven't seen a Penix update, but that's neither here nor there. Jack Tuttle was the guy who Ryan Day was going out to California to watch. And then like, hey, there's this wide receiver. He seems pretty good. What's his deal? And his name is Chris Olave. He's turned out okay, slightly better than Jack Tuttle at the college level, at least so far. Garrett Wilson, Ohio State was down in Texas recruiting Matthew Baldwin, who is the Lake Travis quarterback. And hey, there's this wide receiver and he's blocking a dude into a tree. What's his name? What's that guy's deal? And his deal is he's Garrett Wilson. He's about to light the Ohio State record book on fire. Like, it's so weird how you end up with guys who end up being bigger contributors than their higher profile. Like it's like you're almost finding these guys by accident. And, Garrett Wilson was a 5-star player. It wasn't like he was a super under the radar guy, but when they first saw him, he was under the radar program a guy because they didn't know who he was. They're recruiting his quarterback. So that was just as you were talking, as you were talking, I so often do, just sort of drifted off and was thinking about literally anything else. And I was like, hey, that's an interesting thought. So here we are.
Marcus Williamson, another guy who
nothing, no transition out of that one.
No. I figure just put an ad break right there.
Smart.
Pause. No, Marcus Williamson, another guy who could have taken the easy way out, and even coming back and having the season not go the way he thought it would. He said, "Yeah, you second guess yourself." And Ryan Day, we talked to Marcus Williamson first. We talked to Ryan Day, and Day was asked about Marcus, and he said, Marcus came to him and said, I've basically cleared a lot of noise out of my life, out of my head, out of my surroundings right now, and kind of gave himself over to the team, had his best week of practice, played his best game in a long time. He stood out defensively. Everybody saw that. He's making tackles, making big hits. He also did some good things in the previous game as well. So he's starting to show more, and he attributed it to, the noise. This is a local kid from Westerville right here in the Columbus suburb who is now in his fifth year, was going to compete for that job as that cover safety. That never really happened. I mean, he competed, sure. Lathan Ransom got that job. Then Lathan Ransom moves back to free safety. Cameron Martinez takes over that cover safety. So this is not exactly the final season that Marcus Williamson saw for himself. But like other guys, he said it's hard to leave this place. It's hard to leave these guys. It's hard to leave this program. And eventually it takes some humility to just do what's best for the team. It takes maturity, and it also takes getting rid of the noise from whether it's your own personal noise or the people around you saying, hey, man, why aren't you playing?
Yeah. And it's interesting because he's not someone who necessarily coming out of high school, you heard about like, hey, this is this really mature kid. He wasn't a bad kid. He was just a kid who maybe wasn't. I think he's done a lot of growing up since he's been at Ohio State. How's that? Is that a good way to put that? He came across today. It was like, we don't talk to Marcus Williamson that often. And listening to him today, it was like, wow, that was like a really thoughtful, introspective kind of view of things. And, he did use the word humility. That was something that he was kind of talking about a bunch of different stuff. And at the end, he goes like, humility. That was the word I was looking for. It was like, the humility involved in being willing to help the younger guys. Because balancing being the veteran guy who, all the older wide receivers are always helping all the younger wide receivers learn what it means to be a wide receiver, to set the routine of being a wide receiver. Marcus Williamson's job as one of the older defensive backs is to help the younger defensive backs. Like, that's literally the job. You're there to help train your successor, but sometimes your successor, if they're good enough, could be your replacement. And that's a tricky thing. That's a tricky balance because you want the team to do well, but you also want to play. That's a difficult thing because if the younger guys are good, that's good for the team. If the younger guys are really good, that might not be good for you in terms of how much you're playing. And that's a tough thing to balance. But, it sounds like he has really struck that balance and he's, taking over sort of a leadership role in that room. And, when they make guys available, that's because those are guys that they trust. Those are guys that they, see as leaders on the team. They very clearly see Marcus Williamson as a leader on the team. And that's a tough thing to be when you are, sort of he played a much bigger role last year than he has so far this year. That can be a tough thing. You see a lot of guys in that role in the portal. He was asked about it and said, that wasn't something he was looking at. He wanted to stay here, finish the job, finish the drill, and be a part of this team. And whether he's on, however much he's on the field, he's already been a part of it. Obviously, he played a good role on Saturday, but he is, as he continues to grow and continues to develop this year and helps the other players in that team. He sounds like he's a pretty significant part of that defensive back room.
Now that I think about it, a good question for him may have been regarding that whole thing. When you see your defensive coordinator, Kerry Combs, the guy who brought you to Ohio State, get essentially demoted, lose some play calling duties, has to humble himself, has to be the same guy around the program, around the players, knowing that he was publicly, I don't want to say failed at his job, but had some responsibilities taken away from him. And yet, Kerry Combs had to humble himself and not go off, half cocked or just saying stuff that, not that he ever would say stuff that he wouldn't, but to continue to hold your head high and want what's best for the players and do your job, all the while acknowledging I've been very publicly lost some responsibilities. I wonder how much of an impact that has. Like if this guy can do it, then also maybe I can humble myself and just do what's best for the team. Just like my coach is doing, a guy that I've known, just think how long Kerry Combs and Marcus Williamson have known each other since, I don't know, 2014, something like that when they first started talking, 2015, when Williamson was a local kid here, like a sophomore or whatever, when Kerry Combs probably first started talking to him. So if this is a guy that you look up to so much, can be take himself down and humble himself, maybe it's not so hard for him. Or maybe I'm just reading way too much into all of that, or just, maybe that never even came into play. But it's a nice thought by me, so I thought I would share it.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to the way Ryan Day talked about that situation, which is you can't have egos. Like as a coaching staff, you can't have egos. It's got to be what's best for the team. And that, sounds very much like what Marcus Williamson was talking about. I mean, humility is not having an ego. So you can't have an ego. You put the team before yourself, and you can't worry just about what this means for you. You got to worry about what it means for the team. And if you can get a full team, this is one of those things that's very easy to say. If you can actually get the whole, get your team to buy into that stuff, that's when you have a special season. But it's not easy to do that, because these are guys who have aspirations, and that's maybe even more so now that you have NIL. Like, if Marcus Williamson's playing and he has a pick six, well, maybe he has an NIL deal that becomes available to him that wouldn't have been available to him otherwise. But if you're not playing, that doesn't happen. So that has always been a tricky thing. That might be even a slightly trickier thing now than it used to be. But it sounds like he really is bought in on it, and good for him.
I think it's further evidence that the defensive pieces are falling into place, as we keep saying. Everybody is finding their role. That then allows the defensive coaches to use those guys better, because they know exactly what they can do, what they're good at, what they're comfortable at. The guys know what to do now. It was interesting that the players, maybe it was just Marcus Williamson saying, there's really been no change for us in terms of what the defense has been doing. There's maybe just some different looks that they then incorporate. But all in all, it's just another guy who is finding that role that they can use, and it's another chess piece that they can move around. That we saw him, he's been blitzing as well, and they're just doing a bunch of different things with him as they grow. And Day mentioned doing some things with Craig Young and Ronnie Hickman together. They're kind of moving Craig Young away from that bullet. So it's now that I think they're more comfortable with the defense. Now they can start to tinker. Don't want to tinker too much. But I also, Tom, as we wrap up, I thought it was interesting to me that Ryan Day was asked how he feels about his defense going into a game against an explosive offense like Maryland. And he didn't really say he felt good, didn't really say he felt bad. He just said, this is what happens in the Big Ten. You're going to face good teams. I was expecting him to say something along the lines of, I feel good. I like where we're at. We've been making some plays. We've forced, I think, 7 interceptions in the last 3 games. Things are looking up. Certainly a different defense than they were at the start of the season, but there was none of that. And it just felt like, hey, Ryan, how do you feel about the defense? And he was just like, I guess He didn't even say like, I think his lack of words maybe means he's hopeful, but also he was careful a couple of times not to say like, oh, we're on track now. It's still a week to week thing, as he said, but I was expecting him to at least say, I'm happy with the way things are going.
Yeah, I kind of think that might be almost like you've got a loved one in the hospital, and it's like, well, how are things going? Like, well, I'm hopeful, but the condition is still not discharged. Like there's still some concerns there. There's still some things they're monitoring, and he'll probably feel a lot better or a lot worse after Saturday because Akron and Rutgers are two teams that have not done. I mean, we kind of talked about this on the Michigan Monday show where, yeah, Michigan's defense looks great, but they're not facing teams that can really take advantage of the stuff that, was sort of a concern for Michigan. Ohio State, the last couple of weeks against Akron and Rutgers, like those are not teams that can really drive the ball downfield, push the ball downfield in the passing game. They don't have the explosive playmakers on the outside. Maryland is not super fantastic. Ohio State is not playing Georgia this weekend, and Ohio State is not playing Alabama this weekend. But Maryland has some pieces and some ways to challenge Ohio State that Rutgers and Akron haven't. So, I think Ryan Day is going to probably grade his team incomplete until he gets through this weekend. And then you get through this weekend, and then you get your off week, and then things get a little trickier after that. But this is at least a good kind of milestone for them in terms of, okay, now you're playing a team with a pretty good passing attack and some pretty good pieces on offense for the first time since really the Oregon game. Okay, now what does this look like?
And it's a tricky situation because the defense is playing with more confidence. Everybody feels good about where things stand right now. And then if Maryland carves them up, it's like you're going back to square one now. It's like we thought we were fixed. It turns out we're not fixed at all. Now what do we do? So that I think is a huge concern and maybe part of the reason why Day doesn't want to be too committal yet. But it is a very big question. And you've got all of these different guys. Like the individual pieces seem to be pretty good. They're clearly better when Cam Brown is healthy and out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that limits them a little bit right now. He's still fighting through his thing, and who knows whether he'll be good to go this week. And who knows, Sevyn Banks week to week, I just assume he's going to be okay for the rest of the season. As a starter now, they need him to be. Maybe we'll see more from Ryan Watts and Legend Cavazos. But right now, just the core that you've got of the two starting quarterbacks, whether it's Sevyn Banks or Cameron Brown, Lathan Ransom, Cam Martinez, Ronnie Hickman, have solidified that secondary, or at least we have been given the feeling or the idea that it's solidified, but we'll know more. This is kind of like the magic shell, the ice cream stuff. You pour on the ice cream and it hardens the chocolate shell, and you tap on it. Okay, it's frozen. Or if it's just hot fudge, you tap on it, it's not frozen because that's not what it does. We'll find out exactly, is this the magic shell or is it just hot fudge? And in my experience, you don't want your defense to be hot fudge. You want it to be a magic shell and be a little bit more firm and rigid in order to protect the ice cream.
Do you know which company makes the magic shell?
I used to. Is it Nestle? No,
I'm pretty sure it's Turtle. I'm pretty sure it's called the Turtle shell.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, crap. This is a terrible analogy.
Look at that. Boom. Full circle.
We should end the show there, but I just want to keep talking.
We can talk about Nick Petit-Frere and his, you can Google whether I'm crazy or not. Look up Turtle Magic Shell and see if that comes up with ice cream while I'm talking about Nick Petit-Frere. He had a couple interesting things to say. One of them ties in with the Marcus Williamson thing and just the selflessness of some of the guys on the team, and talking about Thayer Munford kicking inside to guard to allow DeJuan Jones to play, but also Paris Johnson, who was like an all-world offensive tackle. What did he do? He moved inside to guard, and he was said not only was he just blown away with Johnson's willingness to do that, but also with how quickly Johnson has picked up the guard position. He was playing in the national championship game last year, starting there this year. I mean, that is not something that everyone would be willing to do. That was something that was impressive to him. And also, the fact that he also talked about the fact that after the Oregon game, Ryan Day came to some of the upperclassmen. He said the guys in his class and the guys in class ahead of him, and said basically like, yeah, you guys just got to start being more vocal leaders because we need more vocal leaders on this team right now. And it was like, if you don't want to do it, well, too bad. Go ahead and try it. And if it doesn't go well, that's okay. Then you've got a rep and you can get better the next time. And it was like, you don't think of like leadership reps. It's not like you think about, quarterbacks getting reps reading the defense and offensive linemen getting reps against different pass rush techniques. Like you don't think about leadership reps and like guys getting up in front of the team and talking, but it sounds like Day just kind of like threw that out there. Like, all right, guys, need you to do this. And he said that guys have been doing it. And, Day's talked about that as well. Garrett Wilson has talked about doing that and kind of getting up and speaking in front of the team. So, as it's interesting that as they're sort of figuring out the on-field stuff and, some of the, hey, some of the younger guys might be need to do more because they might be better than some of the older guys in some of these positions. Some of the older guys who maybe were not thinking they were going to be leaders are now getting thrust into leadership roles. And, but you sort of get the sense that, I know Ryan Day doesn't want to say they've got it figured out. You get the sense that both on the field and off the field, they're at least figuring things out right now, and they're in a substantially different and much better place than they were a month ago.
Smuckers.
Isn't there a turtle shell?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking maybe Smuckers bought them out or something of that nature. There's various. I'm looking at Magic Shell ice cream topping turtle, and there are turtles. There's like a mascot, So maybe you just see pictures and assume that's the name of stuff because you don't read.
Yes, facts only. Yes. Why do you think I just do podcasts these days?
So, but yeah. Nicholas Petit Frere is always great. He's always interesting. He's one of those guys that you can talk to for a while. And he's also, I was thinking about this. He gives you when you ask him about somebody, he gives you the best version of them. Mm-hmm. Like he tells you all the great things about them. Like you could probably ask him, hey man, tell us about this Shamrock tow truck driver. Well, he's a great parker. He can really get into some tight spaces.
He moves fast.
He's 4 to 6, A to B. Although let's not go there. And he just finds the best things about everybody. He's just a really good dude, and just continue to wish him well in his current endeavors and also future endeavors. Tom, anything else before we go?
Nope, think we're good.
I think we're good as well. So we will stop there. Want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, check us out at BuckeyeScoop.com. You are, if you're not a member, please become one. Try it out for a month. See if you like it. For those who are members, thank you very much for that, as always. And you can continue to find all of our videos, podcasts, streams, highlights, interviews at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop. So thank you all, and we will talk to you tomorrow.